1982, I was lying on a psychiatrist's couch, and I was saying to this very kind, very benevolent man that if I can't change how I am in the world, then I want to end my life. We're out of alignment all the time, and we bring awareness to that and we step back into alignment. We get very attached to our stories. So our stories is, you don't understand, I'm an addict, I need to drink. Or you don't understand, my father didn't love me. Or you don't understand, I was sexually abused as a child. All of those stories we get attached to, and we don't want to give them up. So if we're interested in awakening, if we're interested in waking up from our shadow, from our trauma, from our life, we have to be willing to give up those stories. And most people won't do it.
Hi, I'm Cary, and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care, and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief, and tenacity, we can make so many things happen. So welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast this morning. I'm so delighted to have our guest here, Andrew Wallas from the Academy of Alchemy. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, thank you, Caroline.
So this is an extraordinary thing, and it's one of the reasons I so wanted you to come on the podcast today was because the interesting thing is that when COVID hit, I mean, goodness, everybody was all over the place. What was going to happen in life? You know, I mean, we were all in the same boat, I think, which gave us comfort. But I remember thinking fundraising and events, how on earth am I going to keep that all coming together? And then for some, I don't know how it was, but something popped up. And you were offering the course that you put together through some portal, whatever. And it was the first 20 people. I jumped on it. And I can't tell you what a brilliant, brilliant course it was. And the thing that sort of jumped out at me was all the things, it came from a very different angle in terms of business and what people were doing, because it's all about goals and having tactics and scorecards and various other things. It had so many things, which was like synchronicity, intention, the shadow, and I just loved it. And at the time I was fundraising, so it was relevant. But one of the things that I was developing during lockdown was something called Eat Nourish Love. And one of the things that you suggested that we did is we wrote the goals down and stood on this piece of paper. And I thought this was hysterical. So I did it. So I had this piece of paper standing on it. And then what is really weird is the fact that I sort of did I believe it? Yes, I think I did, but I wasn't sure. But everything that was on that piece of paper is happening now, and I've never been at a greater point where I'm not working for other people fundraising. I'm actually quite a sort of vulnerable space because I'm building my own business. But suddenly, all the tools that you had in that are so relevant to me today. And then I don't know, it was about a week or so ago, you popped into my inbox again with this.
Uninvited.
So it's long-winded stuff, and there's a girlfriend of mine who also was standing on a piece of paper. So we'll talk to her as well. But honestly, how did your work all start, Andrew? Because it's incredible what you've done.
Well, where it really started, which is similar for a lot of people, it started out of adversity. So I sort of hit the wall at 28 and I ended up in a very dark place. And from that place of desperation, I had an amazing spiritual awakening. And people talk about the gift of desperation. And that's really what turned my whole life around, because I was clinically depressed. I was suicidal. I was in a bad way. And I don't know if you want me to tell the story, but I actually in 1982, I was lying on a psychiatrist's couch. And I was saying to this very kind, very benevolent man that if I can't change how I am in the world, then I want to end my life. And that at the time, it felt entirely rational. And 40 years later, it still seems entirely rational. And in 1984, it got a bit worse, actually. And I ran away from England, where I live, and I found myself in America in a small attic room at the top of this house. And I was very anxious, very paranoid. And I don't know why, I just decided to kneel down beside the bed, the small bed in the room. And I said the most honest and authentic prayer I've ever said. I said, if there's a God, for fuck's sake, do something now. And that was the actual prayer. And in that moment, instantaneously, I felt a sense of peace that I'd never felt before. It was unbelievable. And I felt the presence of the divine. And I don't know whether I was on my knees for 2 minutes or 20 minutes or 2 hours, because time just completely stopped. And that was really the beginning. I went off to theological college for 4 years. I thought I might become a priest. I did a master's in psychology. I did numerous psychotherapy trainings, but that was the beginning. It was from that place where all my best thinking, all my best shots had failed drastically. And so I had nothing left to lose. So I just surrendered. And in that moment of surrender, which unfortunately we can't really replicate that. If you could bottle that, you'd be extremely wealthy or extremely popular. But it takes an act of surrender to open the portal to grace or universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it, is fine. But there's a correlation between that giving in and opening up to the most phenomenal energy in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, what a story! But don't you think that so often it is when you get to this point in your life that actually it is an awakening in so many ways,
Mm.
and actually a lot of people who've been very successful in their lives and have got to that rock bottom. It's not been all it's not been an easy ride.
In the outer world, I was very successful. I had a huge salary. I was traveling around the world first class all the time. I had 3 cars, etc., etc. So if everyone thought I was doing extremely well, but nobody knew what was happening on the inside.
So so all the bits that you do in the course. So one of the things I think is really interesting is the thing that I came up with, synchronicity, that suddenly people
Mm.
come into your life for a certain reason, and there's so much synchronicity that's happening in my world at the moment, which leads me to realizing it. I'm watching the outside things that are sharing with me that actually you're on a good course. It's in a good place.
So I think life fits together like a jigsaw. There's lots of different jigsaw pieces. And synchronicity is something that I literally practice, actively practice every day of my life. And I have done for 30 years. And I think the more we practice it, the more synchronicity happens. And the way I talk about synchronicity is you touched earlier, Caroline, on intention. So my big thing is intention. And I differentiate intention from goal setting. And intention for me is a much more holistic process. And I always say nothing in the universe exists without intention. So the house you're living in, the house I'm living in, doesn't exist without intention. The car I drive, nothing exists without intention. So intention is the prerequisite for manifestation. And I work with a particular way with intention, which ends up with us standing into a bit of paper with our intention very clearly marked out. And I've been doing that for 20, 30 years. And I must say, probably 70, 80 intentions have all materialized in my life. And, I've worked with hedge fund managers and people in the city. And there was one hedge fund manager, I tried to get 6 people to do this. And I went back 4 months later, and not one of them had done it for 1 minute. And they were embarrassed. And I said, look, just humor me. Their business was completely stuck. And I said, just for the next 30 days, I want all 6 of you to invest 2 minutes of your time, 2 minutes out of 24. Anyway, they did it for 30 days and the business started to move. And I went back, and out of 6 of them, 4 or 5 of them still maintained standing on the bit of paper had it wasn't to do with that. And that was fine. I don't mind that at all. But the reason I do this is we have 75 trillion cells in our body. And when we stand on a bit of paper, we stand into the essence of our intention. We are literally embodying that intention. It's a much more holistic approach than goal setting, which is really left brain activity.
A lot of people say, really, that's a little bit woo-woo, standing on a piece of paper. But I think, standing on a piece of paper, it is the word intention, isn't it? You are intending that to happen.
It's your intention.
And I think so often it's like, someone once says, if you're going to do it. You put the intention there and believe it.
So what I've done with lots of different groups is with a flip chart, you can write out the word impotent and you can write out the word powerful. And if you get them to stand into the bit of paper with impotent or powerlessness written on it, you will watch the whole body collapse, the chest goes concave, blah, blah, blah. When you stand on a bit of paper with powerful, they look 8 inches taller. Now, you can call that autosuggestion. You can describe it in lots of different ways, but there's a reality. I've done that hundreds of times, and everyone in the room sees the difference in the body. So words have power, as we know.
Yeah.
And when you stand into the essence of the words with intent, then this is a very powerful thing.
Extraordinarily powerful. So the first I think was intention. Was the second one synchronicity? What was this?
No, so the second one is alignment.
Yeah.
So I use really simple examples. So if I set an intention, which I sometimes do, to lose weight, and then on Wednesday or Friday I'm at a garden centre and a bit of carrot cake is winking at me, so I have 2 pieces of cake a day, I'm not aligned with that intention. And you'd be amazed how many people set an intention and then go out and do the opposite. So alignment is critical. Intention is what mathematicians call a necessary condition. Without intention, there's nothing. So intention is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need alignment with the intention. So you create the intention, and then on a daily basis, you align with that. Some people, in January or other times of the year, they want to get fit, they join a gym, but they never go to the gym. They're not aligned with that intention. So alignment is really important. And when you have intention, a clarity of intention, plus alignment, then you create synchronicity all the time.
So it could be a little bit like, if you wanted to put it in sort of, the language that a lot of people will be thinking about is goals and then action, because action is so you're doing the action, so they're aligned with your intention.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. Yes. And also alignment is multi-leveled because we need to be aligned in our thinking. So for example, we can set an intention and then we can spend all day, that will never happen. Nothing ever happens for me. It's not going to work. And our thinking is completely out of alignment with the intention. Equally, our emotions can be out of alignment. So eventually our actions, of course, need to be aligned. But it's everything needs to be aligned with what we're trying to do. And alignment is not perfect. I sometimes use the example of if you go to a classical concert and you see all these violinists, relentlessly tweaking their thing, and it's out of tune, and they get to a moment where it's in tune, it's aligned with the musical scale, and then they relax. But the only way they can get alignment is by hearing it out of alignment. And it's the same in our lives on a daily basis. We're out of alignment all the time, and we bring awareness to that and we step back into alignment.
So interesting. And then the next phase?
Well, the next stage is the shadow, which is a huge subject. And as we all know, I've been working on my shadow for 42 years, and I'm a work in progress. There's still lots of stuff coming up, I can promise you. So the shadow, the thing about the shadow is people, including myself, we're sometimes nervous of it, we're a little bit frightened of it, but the shadow is the place of greatest reward. It really is the place of greatest reward. So whatever I'm dealing with now, I often say to people, it's been very well hidden for a long time, because otherwise I would have got to it before now. I've been doing it for 40 years. So whatever I free up in the shadow next week gives me a huge additional energetic release to achieve more in my life. So it's a little bit like, again, if you go to a chiropractor or a osteopath, right now I feel relaxed in my body. I feel perfectly aligned.
Yeah.
But if I went to a chiropractor, within 4 or 5 minutes, she or he would find 2 or 3 areas of my body that were out of alignment, which I didn't know about. And the moment they're brought back into alignment, there's a rush of energy. It's a fantastic feeling. I often walk out from an osteopath feeling like I'm walking on air.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of how much more energy and flow is available to you. And that's what we want in our life.
So give us a few examples of what a shadow can look like.
So again, one of the misconceptions about a shadow is we often think of the shadow as negative. So a shadow could be tenderness. So in my family, as a white male, I was not encouraged to be sensitive or tender or soft. And so all of that got suppressed. And it's a little bit like the iceberg. It's under the surface. And encountering my shadow, I had to reclaim my sensitivity, my tenderness, my gentleness. Whereas for a lot of my life, I felt that was weak. I felt if I'm gentle, particularly in business, people are going to, climb all over me. So another example of a shadow could be anger. In my family system, nobody got angry. It's like, it was amazing. In 60 years, I never once saw my mother or my father shouting or angry with each other. In my wife's system, they all embraced anger. They shout at each other all the time. They're all very, very comfortable with it. So it honestly has been a sort of 20, 30-year process for me to be really comfortable with my anger. And of course, because it was suppressed, when it first comes up, it's rage. It's very strong. And so, I've done it gradually. Another example might be jealousy. I discovered quite late in life that I'm a really jealous person. And but it's not fashionable. It's not, when I'm with my friends in the pub, you don't admit to being jealous. No. So it goes into the shadow. And there's a whole range of things. And what's fascinating, what's in your shadow or what's in my wife's shadow is completely different to mine. So one of the purposes of relationship is, if we want to create intimacy or if we want to create more intimacy, you can't do that without engaging with our own shadow. And when we engage with another bit of the shadow, we immediately create more connection, more intimacy.
Yeah, I'm sort of understanding it. I'm just trying to work out, I suppose, trying to work out what my shadow is when you go through that. I think we touched on that the other day, and I'm seeing you later, so I'll tell you about that. But it is quite, yeah. It is interesting, because when you face that, I mean, can it be fear as well?
Oh, it's all fear-based. And, in some ways, you could say that 99% of my problems are fear-based. There's a fear there about something. So there's a fear about jealousy. There's a fear about envy. There's a fear about being tender. There's a fear about whatever it is I'm not acknowledging. And fear is pernicious. That 99% of fear is an illusion. If there was a tiger in the room that hadn't eaten for 3 weeks, then fear would be rational and entirely appropriate. But most of the time, I've often been in situations where I've said to people, if you put electrodes on my head and my heart now, it would be like there was a wild animal in the room about to attack me, because my body trauma is visceral. Everybody knows when we get triggered, everybody knows what it's like to be triggered. There's a visceral reaction. My heart starts pumping. I'm in a fight flight mode. But it's illusion, because the threat is not there. The threat is from the past.
So could that be something like imposter syndrome?
A what?
Could that be something like imposter syndrome?
I think imposter syndrome, there's a link there, but I think imposter syndrome is a bit different. So imposter syndrome is, when I'm on a stage, I'm talking to a group of people, and the voice says, "What the hell are you doing?" I was actually teaching a group once, a training group, and I was spouting forth, I can be very articulate. And in the middle of it, this voice came up and said, "You're a complete fraud. What on earth are you doing?" And I decided, it was a rare moment of complete authenticity. I shared that with the group, and I said, "I'll tell you just what happened. I felt completely inauthentic. I felt like I was a fraud, blah, blah, blah." And of course, it turned out to be one of the best training sessions I've ever done.
Yeah.
Because we all have that voice. We all, we could be making love to our beloved and have an imposter moment and think, "Oh my God, I'm a hopeless lover. I'm sure she's not going to be satisfied." We all have that going on all the time.
What could be a shadow to someone who's trying to lose weight or trying to get in shape? What's an example of a shadow?
Well, I think, again, it's very broad, Caroline. So there's a lot of obvious things. So if someone has experienced some sort of trauma, especially any sexually related trauma, so, often for children, their parents or adults create shame around the body, with sometimes some quite mild comments. And then there's a whole spectrum that leads on from that, where there's been some very serious sexual abuse. And when that's happened, we don't want an attractive body. So we often it's like a layer of armor.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of obesity and a lot of weight, it is often a sort of self-protection armor, which makes complete sense because of what's happened in the past. We're protecting ourselves from any kind of repetition.
Yeah.
But there's a range of other things as well.
It's interesting because I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and she told me, a terrible story that she went through as a young child, and that's why she had an eating disorder, because
Yeah.
so similar to that.
So another interesting way into that, I live with my wife and my daughter, who talk a lot about weight a lot. They're both very thin. They're very obsessed with being thin. And the fact of the matter is, certainly in our country, in most countries, there's a fashion industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And little girls from the age of 3, 4, 5, they grow up with this obsession of thinness, and you can't escape it. It's there all the time. So the shadow, and I've known a lot of women who are size 8, size 6, size 10, very thin, no excess fat on them. And they're very attached to that shape and to that thinness. Now, their shadow is to do with being out of control, overeating, not being able to control their life. So very often when we look great and we've got the perfect figure, there's a huge shadow there that is not being addressed. So in the same way, if someone is, let's say 3 or 4 stones overweight, the shadow will be around not wanting to be highly desirable or attractive or everything else, but they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. So it could be it's because they don't have the beliefs that they want to be, that they just don't. Yeah, exactly. So that's that one, and then what's the next stage?
Well, the next stage, we then go through a sort of process which involves flow. So I love the idea of flow. So in an office or in our home, my wife is a little bit obsessed with clutter clearing. So twice a year we have to get rid of all this stuff. I know, and she does have a point, because in the last 20 years or so, a lot of businesses have learned from feng shui in the East, where they put a lot of emphasis on the flow of energy through a room or through a business. And I remember going into businesses where they had filing cabinets with files piled high, and you couldn't navigate, and all that clutter affects people, affects the way they think. So you have the physical level of flow. You then have the mental flow. Now, most of us, the biggest addiction on the planet, I always ask people, what's the biggest addiction on the planet? And for me, it's compulsive thinking. I would say 99% of people on the planet suffer from compulsive thinking. So if we're thinking all the time, there's no room for flow. There's no room for the natural flow. We're blocking the natural flow that's going on. Same with emotions, and same spiritually, that spiritually we need to be open. So for me, grace, which is one of my favorite words in the English language, is available 24/7. So what is happening? It's not just available at 3:30 this afternoon, or it's not available to some people and not others. It's not more available to you than to me, as bad as I am. So how do I access grace? It's by allowing myself to be in flow. And it's back to alignment and the violin and everything else. In nature, if you take Chinese medicine or you take Ayurvedic medicine, the reason I'm drawn to those two arenas of medicine is they're both rooted in nature.
Yeah.
And they're both, all of their examples are about trees and rivers. So the optimum health is everything in flow. So it doesn't matter what the illness is. If you've got a heart problem, I can't tell you how many people are on high blood pressure tablets. There's a block. If you've got any kind of illness, there's a block in the physical body. And if we actually spent time creating flow in the body, there'd be far less illness around.
So that's working on the meridians, the energy, the Reiki, or the reflexology, opening up the chakras and various other things. And you're right.
All of that.
It's so interesting going back to to where it all started, because it all started, with the Chinese medicine and the philosophy, and it was always about, the doctor was there, to keep people well, not. They dealt with keeping people well, so they didn't want them to keep coming into their clinics and everything else. They wanted them not to.
Exactly. And even so, I'm a great fan of reflexology, because within 10 minutes, and you can do it to yourself, it's not as much fun, it's much nicer to have someone else, but I mean, your feet will tell you exactly where a problem is in your kidneys, in your pancreas, and it's really simple, really straightforward, but it's just showing you where the block is.
Yeah, I do reflexology. I do reflexology and Reiki, actually. So,
oh, do you? I didn't know that.
No, it's funny, but
I'll be knocking on your door for a session.
I love it, but also I think when sort of due to certain things in my life, that once when I went to do some Reiki with someone, they said, it'd be really good for you to learn it yourself. And so I did, and I remember doing it. It was many years ago, and I did my sort of masters and things like that. And I remember driving through London, and I remember thinking, God, what power we have in our hands. It's so simple, really, isn't it?
Everything. That is actually the next module, is simplicity. So all of this stuff is incredibly simple. And sometimes I give people homework in an office environment or a home environment. I say, you should try this for the next 48 hours, okay? Is for the next 48 hours, just listen to how many times you hear people use the word complicated. So you meet a friend and they'll say, Andrew, you don't understand, it's so complicated. Or you're sitting in an office or a work environment and people say, yeah, it's really complicated. And I never, ever accept that. I say, I don't believe it is. I think everything in life is simple, everything. And really what we do is we create complication. Human beings are obsessed with complication. So we create complication for a variety of reasons, either to sound clever or to solve it, look better when we solve it, or to keep the status quo, to maintain homeostasis. So complexity, I was talking about something early this morning where somebody just keeps going into the complexity to avoid dealing with the issue.
Do you know, it's really funny. There's someone I know who always says, it's so hard. Oh, it's so hard. And I thought, well,
Yeah,
their life's going to be hard then, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Exactly right. Exactly right.
And
It's a bit like, no, you go.
just, with just what you said, oh, it's so complicated. Well, actually, it's quite simple. If you look at the whole thing with weight
Mm.
and work and I was just reading the books 12 Weeks, what you can do in 12 weeks rather than 12 months. Fascinating, because it
Amazing.
these things, and it was just saying, it's very simple, because if you're not doing the actions,
Mm.
or you're not taking action to do these things, or you're not letting, or you're not sleeping well, or it is simple, isn't it? And you're right, it's complicated. I often think people overcomplicate it, because it's also jobs for people. It's a reason for people having jobs as well.
So I'll give you an example that many people might find controversial, and I apologize if it's offensive or controversial for people. But my background is in addiction, and I was an alcoholic. I reached a really low point with alcoholism, and I've been sober for 42 years, and I haven't had any drugs or alcohol. But and I've worked with probably over 1,000 addicts of one form or another. I've worked with a lot of people who are heroin addicts, cocaine, etc., etc. But if I work with addiction now, what I say to people is, look, 51% or more of you wants to drink, or 51% or more of you wants to take heroin. That's fine. 49% or less of you wants to stop. And people get very angry sometimes, and they say, no, I really want to stop. I said, no, you don't. You don't, or you wouldn't be drinking. If and people introduce things like addiction and this and that, but it's incredibly simple. That when 51% or more of you wants to stop drinking, you will stop. And I understand addiction from the inside out. And I've worked with people that are drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day and have no bowel control, and got this one poor fellow got hit by a bus. And so I do know about the seriousness and the trauma and tragedy of addiction, but it still comes back to the simple thing. I knew I reached a point where I was completely beaten, and I knew in every cell of my body I didn't want to drink again. And I thank God for that moment, because it was a blessing. I hit a rock bottom earlier than some people, but later than others. But you've just got to want to stop.
Exactly. You remind me a little bit of sort of Tony Robbins. It says, someone says, I'm so depressed. And it said, change your state, get up and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Put the
Yeah.
music on, go and give your
Yeah.
dog a cuddle. You live in that state, and it's you choose to be in that state.
So here's again. This is a wall for a lot of people. But I recorded a video recently that went out on LinkedIn or somewhere, and I said, people don't want to change. Most people don't want to change. I don't want to change. I have a lot of resistance to change in me. But what happens is we get very attached to our stories. So our stories is, you don't understand, I'm an addict, I need to drink, or you don't understand, my father didn't love me, or you don't understand, I was sexually abused as a child. All of those stories we get attached to, and we don't want to give them up. So if we're interested in awakening, if we're interested in waking up from our shadow, from our trauma, from our life, we have to be willing to give up those stories. And most people won't do it. And
Yeah. That relates a little bit to again, sorry to mention another name, but Joe Dispenza, break the habit of being yourself, isn't it?
yeah, exactly right. Is the best example for me was, for 40 years of my life, one of my big stories was my father didn't love me. And I had this pile of evidence that was better than any barrister or KC, including the fact he told me he didn't love me. So any therapy group or any group I went into, social or whatever, sooner or later I say, oh, my father never loved me. And it was like, I laugh at it now because that defined who I was. That was my identity. And then there was a day, it's like all transformation really is a happening. There was a moment when I knew in every cell of my body that my father had loved me from the moment I was conceived up to and including today. He's been dead for 18 years. But I know that. And it changed the whole optic of my life.
Yeah.
It changed how I relate to men, how I relate to women, how I relate to myself. But that was a story.
Yeah.
And you know, he'd even told me he didn't love me, but it wasn't true. You know, so whatever the big stories are about our life, it's like I always say, are you willing to give that up? And people say, no, but it happened. I said, I know, but are you willing to give it up?
So just for people listening to this, what we're going through here at the moment is that the course that you did are these at different stages of the course. They're the different chapters, or what you want to call it. So we've just done what the last one, which was simplicity.
Yeah, and look, we could talk about the others. That the next one is not knowing, and I've been into a lot of businesses over the last 20 years, and I've talked to CEOs about the power of not knowing. So any CEO I've ever spoken to feels that they have to know. And, you know, if you look at any politician, I'm waiting for the day when a politician somewhere gets up in front of the voters and says, I have absolutely no idea what to do. You know, it's like, it's never happened yet. But what I've discovered, and again, as a simple example, you know, if we went to a lecture on biochemistry and we wanted to find out, and we went to one of the top biochemists in the world, and we sit there and we think, oh yeah, she's got that. Oh yeah, she's got that right. Oh, she hasn't quite understood that. She hasn't. What we do is we evaluate the lecture against what we think we already know. And that's what most people are doing every day of their lives. And it's completely limited because there's no room for new knowledge. And if instead we went, even if we're an expert, and said, okay, I'm going to sit in the place of not knowing and with a sense of curiosity.
Oh, I love that word.
It's so powerful, Caroline. And so
every single podcast. Curiosity.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's like, I want to be curious about life. You know, I want to, I genuinely feel I'm a novice at love. I'm a novice at loving my wife. I want to come from a place of not knowing to learn, how do I love my wife better? How do I love myself better? How do I show up better for my friends? Instead of thinking I've got all the answers. And this is particularly true of spiritual teachers. You know, like you, I've met a lot of spiritual teachers in my life. And too many of them stand up and they come from this place that they've somehow arrived somewhere and they've got the answers. And the tragedy of that is lots of other people then follow their footsteps and try to get where they are, and they never get there. Instead, you know, what I say is, look, I'm a work in progress. I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm an unfinished, you know, person. Every year I become more evolved. Every year I wake up and I'm excited about it. I want this year and next year to be the best years. You know, it's like, I'm excited about the amount of change that is possible.
But also, don't you think that, that it's quite interesting when people say, oh, I know. It's such a block, because
it closes everything down.
None of us know.
It's terrible.
We're always going to be a work in progress.
Yeah. And it's amazing how many people come from that place. And this comes back to, I've asked thousands of people to step onto a bit of paper for 2 minutes a day, and they know better. They've already decided that isn't going to work. And yet I've been doing it for years and it works every time. So it's that, and I'm doing that to other people in some areas of my life, you know?
It's why not give it a shot? You know, it's a bit like
exactly
the whole thing about manifesting and meditation and you know, doing that. And sometimes you go, well, what have you got to lose?
Yeah.
What have you got to do?
And I think another big piece of this, which I was saying to someone yesterday, is forgiveness. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about forgiveness. So for me, and what I say on the in the Academy of Alchemy is 100% of forgiveness is for myself. It's never for you. It's never for the other person. And forgiveness is really letting myself off the hook for what happened. So, there's been trauma in my life. There's everyone's had some element of trauma, and it's not a competition. I don't need to compete with you as to who had the worst experience, although you often get into that in groups and things. But the thing is, whoever did what they did to me, I forgive them because I want to unburden. I want to be free of that burden. I want to put it down. And there's two things we need to understand about that. The first is I'm not making what happened okay. It wasn't okay. It was horrendous. So when I forgive, I'm not making it okay. The second thing is I don't have to hang around with that person ever again. Sometimes we think if I forgive them, I have to go out to supper with them. No. So the forgiveness, and I think personally, I think for any human being, there's no possibility of psychological, emotional, and spiritual maturity unless we're willing to forgive both our parents. I met someone on Wednesday who said, "I'll never forgive my father," and I just felt so sad because he's going to be stuck in that for the rest of his life. And my father and my mother, they were very imperfect. They had a lot of difficult things in their life, but they gave me the gift of life. So I honor them and I thank them for giving me the gift of life, whatever else went on. And I release them and release myself from all the stories around what happened.
I think one also has to remember that they hadn't been there before. They did the best they could, and not to judge that. And
Exactly.
obviously, it's very easy to sit here. There will be people who've been through some horrendous things that that we could never imagine. So
Yeah.
it's and as you rightly say, people can listen to this and say, but you don't understand, and I probably may not, but I think what you just said is about forgiveness is the fact that you then you untie yourself from this resentment, don't you? So because
Yeah.
that just eats you up.
Hmm. And again, this is a very general comment and it might not land with people, but I think there's a profound element to this. I always ask people to reflect on this because having had a clinical practice for 40 years, one day it dawned on me that a lot of people that don't have happy lives, or a lot of people that don't seem to be able to move things through, what I discovered is that unconsciously, they are keeping other people, particularly their parents, on the hook for something. Because if I allow myself to be really happy, if I allow myself to be fulfilled, if I allow myself to love and be loving, within that allowance, simultaneously, I have to admit my parents did a good enough job. I'm here, I'm loving, I'm living, I'm happy. And it's unconscious with a lot of people. They don't want to do that. They don't want to think it was all okay.
Yeah,
But it was. It's all okay.
yeah, yes, because yes. So, how many other areas on the course? How many other?
So what for me, Caroline, I'm a little bit older than you, but I've been doing this for 40 years, and I decided to create this app, which is unbelievable for me because I'm a technophobe. I don't understand any kind of element of technology, but I created this app. And I love the word academy. I've never really. I have a bit of a prejudice against schools. I was so unhappy at school. I don't. Some people have it with hospitals. If I go into a school, I feel my body starting to tense a little bit. Not so much now, but I used to. So I love the word academy and I love the word alchemy. So I created this app called the Academy of Alchemy. And alchemy for me is probably the most powerful metaphor for transformation So the early alchemists were taking a base metal, normally lead, and turning it into gold. And the whole focus of this app is how do we turn sadness and depression into joy? How do we turn anxiety into peace? How do we transform competition into collaboration? And ultimately, how do we transform suffering into wisdom? Because all my wisdom, for some days my wife would say I don't have a lot, but other days I do have a bit of, all of my wisdom comes from suffering. It's a transformation. And the 7 other teachers on the app that range from a hypnotherapist to an astrologer to Chinese medicine to a homeopath. And these are all people that I've known for 20 or 30 years. They're people I respect. They're people I admire. They're all actively involved in their own shadow work. They're not, projecting that onto other people. So it really is the culmination of the last 40 years for me, and the culmination of where you and I connected a while ago. And I'm just immensely proud of it. I'm loving it, and I'm going to give it another 10 years.
But something, it's such a different way of looking at it. I'm not sure there's anything else out there like that, because actually, just looking at business and just sitting here with you, it gives you an awful lot of peace, the way you look at business and transformation and solving the problems, because you're looking at the face of all those hard things, difficulty, conflict, competition, and turning it into using a different vocabulary with it.
So I've worked a lot with business in the last 10 years, and that was because, having worked with individuals for 20 years, I thought if we're going to really change the planet, we've got to bring business with us. And I love going into business and talking about these slightly esoteric terms, but trying to meet them where they are. And competition is a classic one, because the economic system on the planet is capitalism. In every country, pretty much, China and Russia both embrace capitalism. And capitalism is rooted in competition. It's based on the idea there's not enough, and you and I have to compete for a set of limited resources. And competition is rooted in lack. There's not enough. So the whole economic system on the planet is running every day and 24/7 on lack. And I've seen this.
Yeah.
And individuals are also running their life on lack. I've been lucky to know people who, with 700-800 million in the bank or 3 billion in the bank, they're still running on lack. They don't think there's enough.
Yeah.
And what I say is that the last module of this program is called the infinite. And what would happen if a significant minority of us got out of bed every morning and knew there was enough? There's enough water, there's enough food, there's enough love, there's enough forgiveness, there's enough. And so again, I love Psalm 23. And the psalmist said, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I often say that to myself, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. We need to begin to practice coming from a place where there is no lack. And that then creates collaboration. You're incredibly collaborative, and I love that about you. I practice collaboration all the time. It's like, yeah, you have that. It's like whatever I give away comes back to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I many years ago, I once said to someone, oh, I did that, and she didn't do that. And they said, did you do that because you wanted something back? Or did you just do it because you wanted to do it? I said, well, because I wanted to do it. Well, then don't expect to get it back from the same place.
Yeah. And the other thing about collaboration and karma, I like the Eastern idea of karma, but in Western science, we have the same thing. So Isaac Newton's third principle is, for every action, there's a reaction equal and opposite. But the thing about karma is I love helping other people's children. So I have 4 daughters, And every time I help other people's children, I think someday, somewhere on the planet, someone will help one of my daughters. So it doesn't come back from the person we're helping. It's like we never know how it comes back, but it will just energetically. Someone once explained to me that karma is like a balance sheet. If you take Microsoft or Google, or take Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, Tesla, all these companies together, and imagine the millions of entries they have on their balance sheet. And every quarter they produce a balance sheet where it all balances. It has to balance every dollar of expense, every dollar of income, and it all balances. That's how karma is. It's like a universal balance sheet. If I'm unkind to you, it's on the balance. That unkindness has to come back. It's got a balance. If I'm kind to you, I get a lot of kindness in my life. And every day I try to practice just being kind to people. And there is an enlightened self-interest in this. I want to be kind to others. I want people to be kind to me. But you can't escape it.
No, I agree about that. And I think it's, yeah, I think it's quite interesting. We were talking about it the other day, and I went up to someone and I walked past this person at Waterloo. I thought, oh gosh, she looks lovely, and I thought, well, why didn't you tell her? Because,
Yeah, yeah.
and I felt a bit strange. I said, I just got to say that it's such a pretty dress.
I know.
And you don't realise what that will do for that person. You don't know what they've been through. I didn't do it for anything back. It's just, but you thought, well, actually, why keep that silent? Why don't you share your joy, your love, your kindness, your thoughts? If someone needs some help, help them, pick them up. It's amazing how few people do it these days.
It's a really lovely practice that I've done at various times. I must get back into it. But every day to tell 3 people, I really appreciate you. So I'm going to start with you, Caroline. I really appreciate you. And I do. But it's like, as you say, it's so nice to hear that. And it's such a simple thing, just to let people know you appreciate them.
Many, many years ago, I don't know where it was the weirdest thing, but someone said, if you ever walk past a meter where someone's car's run out and you see it, put some money in it. I think I did.
Why not?
Thinking, that's a bizarre thing to do, isn't it? But it's because
it is.
The point about that was that no one would ever know. It was anonymous.
No.
It was.
I love that.
It was,
yeah.
You were giving something, but you weren't looking for any return or any thank you for it. You were doing something, and it was just saying, just get used to doing kind deeds anonymously.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
well, we all know what it's like to give a gift to someone, particularly a child, but even to an adult, to give a gift, and the pleasure we get from when it hits the spot, their eyes light up, oh my God, and there's so much pleasure in that, and we don't want anything back. And so there's a joy in that. That's what joy is. And the more we can do that anonymously to that person, the better we feel better about ourselves.
Yes, so in a funny sort of way, you could say it's quite a selfish act, because you're doing something because you feel better about yourself, but actually it's not. It's just the life cycles.
Well, I do think, again, there's a massive confusion around love. I think 90% of what people talk about love is not love. But I think there's a confusion about self-love, because we live in this incredibly narcissistic society that's very egocentric. But I don't think you can love anyone else unless you love yourself. In fact, I think the limitation of my love for you is restricted by the restriction of my love for myself. So self-love, it all starts with self-love. And I sometimes, in fact, on the app, there's a video about the triangle of love, where you have God at the pinnacle, me here, you here. And we think of loving God or loving myself or loving the other person as 3 different things. But in my world, there's only one thing. It's like a spot in the middle of the triangle. And if I'm saying I love you, but I don't love God, then I'm lying. If I say I love God, but I don't love myself, I'm lying. So we need to understand that energetically, It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
So I just want to get back to one thing, because to understand this thing about narcissism, because I know it's something that's coming out so much at the moment. I never really understood it. Can you just explain what you mean by
Yeah.
narcissism?
So the early Greeks, where all this comes from, the Greek mythology, the Greek mind and the Greek psyche was amazing. So the tragedy of Narcissus, it's about a god figure who looks into a pond and sees his image, and he falls in love with the image. So the tragedy of narcissism is that he doesn't love himself. He loves the image. And so all of us exist in a society where the image is hugely important. So we talked earlier about, being size 8 or size 10. We talked about having hair, not having hair. We talked about, having the perfect figure, being charming. We all have an image. And you can't not have an image. So I have an image of myself as a father, as a son, as a brother. I have an image of myself as a lover, etc., etc. But it's when we fall in love with that image, or when we think that's who I am, we're in deep trouble. So the way the society operates, particularly in America and Western Europe, we all operate as if the image is who I am. And that's when you get imposter syndrome, and that's when you get problems. And one of the things I've said for about 30 years, that the greater the gap between the image and the reality, the bigger the problem. So if you take, again, it might be controversial, but if you take people in a royal family or something, their whole life is image. They're literally on display all the time. That's not who they are. And that gap is huge. But it's the same for all of us, that it's a little bit like if you're a waiter and you're waiting on tables and you're taking orders, you're in a role. My role is I'm a waiter. But I know that that's a role. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
And occasionally my daughter or my wife says to me, look, we don't want you to show up to this event. Can you just put yourself on the shelf? We want you to come as a normal father, I don't know what that is, but I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to play a role, and I know that I'm playing a role. The danger is when we think that that's who we are. And most people are caught in that trap most of the time.
So it's interesting. So if someone says, so if someone is a lawyer, for example, and someone looks at them and said, well, because you're the lawyer, that's it. They've always made that their identity a lawyer, not who they are.
Yeah. It's the same with a doctor. The problem with the law, and I've had quite a lot of experience with the law. That's another episode. But is the law is very, very masculine. It's very combative, and it's very competitive. So I was in court as a juror once, and there was this female barrister who just scared the shit out of me. And she was more masculine than any man I've ever met. And so the problem there is they're taking that home. That's how they're living their life, in that very competitive, razor sharp, argumentative mode. And that's not real.
No.
It's the same with a doctor. Some doctors spend their whole life helping other people, and it's not real. That's not who they are.
No. Goodness, I could talk to you for hours. Well, I'm going to come popping up and see you after this, but I could sit here and talk to you. Firstly, thank you so much, and thank you so much for sharing that course with me all those years. Well, if not all those years, a few years ago, because honestly, it's. I feel I do. I just feel so calm and at peace just talking to you, and you make it so simple and so real for everybody. I think that's and the way you put everything together is amazing, and I think your app is phenomenal. So before our listeners leave, could you leave them with 3 things that you think would help?
So they're going to be a bit uncomfortable for people because I'm passionate about real change. So and they all kind of connect with the shadow in some ways. The first one is if you're interested, if people say, okay, well, what do I change right now? How do I evolve to the next thing? The easiest and most effective way to do that is think of three things that really piss you off in other people. Not just ordinary things, but things that you think, oh, I can't stand that. So it could be something like hypocrisy. It could be dishonesty. People say, I can't stand dishonesty. But whatever it is, write them down. And then spend the next 3 weeks trying to find those three things in yourself. So I could give you some wonderful stories of how, I didn't think I was a hypocrite. And then when I did this exercise, you just open the door a little bit. And I thought, oh my God, I'm a complete hypocrite. And all these examples of my hypocrisy came flooding up. But now the great thing about that is I have no fear of it. And I'm not pretending. I don't have to pretend not to be a hypocrite. I am a hypocrite. I am dishonest. So it's all about becoming whole and not needing to hide anything. So that's a very powerful exercise.
So that's your power of three then?
That's the first one.
That's the first one. Okay.
First one. The second one, which is linked to that, again, it's a really, really simple thing. When we find ourselves judging people, which we do all the time, at various points in my life, I've tried not to judge people. It's impossible. You're judging people all the time. Normally, within about 3 seconds of meeting someone, you're judging. Oh, they're very wrinkled. They're rather fat. They're this. So it goes on. When we find ourselves judging person for whatever, we add the words "just like me." So I might be talking to you, and I might think, "Oh my God, you're really arrogant, just like me." She's a hypocrite, just like me. So it's a lovely way of bringing us into humanity and recognizing, because the way the world works, what we do is we deny something in ourselves. Say I deny anger in myself, and I then project anger onto someone else. And guess what? I find an angry person to project it on. They are angry. So I carry on the illusion that I'm not angry, they're the angry one. So what I need to do is integrate my anger, and then I never have a problem with angry people.
Yeah.
It's a really simple thing. And, a lot of us, we spend years doing complex trainings or esoteric trainings that are sexy or interesting. But this is where it happens. If you want to change and you do those two things, you're going to really start changing. Or what you're going to do is find how much resistance to change you've got.
Yeah, and that's looking in the mirror, isn't it? That's your mirror work.
Yeah. So the third one, which is a little bit similar, but it's to do with relationship, is the nature of polarity. So a lot of books have been written about duality and about polarity, and what that really means is we live in a world of polarity. So you cannot have beauty without ugliness.
Yeah.
It would have no reference. You cannot have tidiness without messiness. Yeah. You cannot have peace without noise. And so what happens in a relationship, every relationship on the planet, but particularly intimate relationships between two spouses or two partners, is we decide unconsciously, look, you be the tidy one, I'll be the messy one. You be the calm one, I'll be the angry one. You be the vocal one, I'll be the quiet one. And that happens in every relationship. Yeah. And it's like a seesaw. So you're up here, I'm here. And sometimes we can switch it.
Yeah.
But we go back to our default. And the real key is in a seesaw is to reach that equilibrium where I'm beautiful and I'm ugly. I'm calm and I'm agitated. And so on. I'm a hypocrite and I'm authentic. So it's being willing to have everything. And somebody once said, I'll finish on, it's a great thing. Somebody once said, there's not an act in human history, nor will there ever be an act in human history which I'm not capable of. And I understand the truth of that. That resonates with truth. If you do certain things to me, if you beat me as a child, I'll go out and do a whole lot of horrific things. And what we've done as a society, and this is a serious pandemic, is we've created all this separation. We're split off from all these different groups. And these three things, what we're doing and what the Academy of Alchemy is doing, there is a collective transformation going on right now. You and I were living it, Caroline. And it's going to happen. No one can stop it. And I call it a biological evolutionary process. The human species is evolving, and we need to evolve or we won't survive. And this is part of that evolution, is to stop splitting and saying, you're dishonest, I'm so honest. And all of these exercises are designed to bring me into a greater sense of wholeness. And that's where I meet the divine. That's where I meet my wife with a sense of intimacy. That's where I meet my friends, where I'm not judging them for having been short-tempered. Yeah, I'm short-tempered too. It's realizing that we're all of it, and we want to share our existence together and support each other in a collaborative way.
Wow, that's so powerful. And we have to end on that because it's so powerful.
We have to end.
Where can people find you before we leave? We'll put it in the show notes as well, but where can people find
you? I think probably Andrew at andrewwallas.org, O-R-G. The email is probably the best. But do have a look at the Academy of Alchemy. You know, the course that you did was on my website. It cost £6,000. During COVID, I offered it. Hundreds, if not thousands of people did it for free. Yeah. And it's now, the whole course is on the app, updated, for less than £1 a week. So it's about making this information available.
Oh, that's so wonderful. You're such a collaborative. You're so generous. And to have done that, you know, has changed. Well, it certainly has made a huge impact in my life. So I'm so grateful. But thank you so much for taking the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. God bless.